Hi everyone, Ian here. Today I'm going to be talking about how I use automation tools or low code to run my dev newsletter. Now, low code is one of those trigger words for devs, like serverless. It's an oxymoron that can make us grit our teeth a little. When first hearing on the concept of low code, I have to admit I cringed a little bit. The idea that an end user could use them to combine apps and services without ever getting a dev involved seemed like it wouldn't actually lead to anything genuinely valuable. Well, I'm happy to admit I was wrong. I've been on my own journey through these types of automation services recently, searching for something that would suit me as a developer. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how I run my curated newsletter using a service called Pipedream, and I'll show you the code behind it so you can do something similar too. Before we start, if you're new to my channel, I'm a software developer and I show you how to build great software through my own tutorials, projects and reviews. And today I'm looking at low code. So let's kick off by defining what I mean by that. So it's a way, basically, to build services or apps without writing any or minimal code. So no versus low code, hence the name. Generally, this is done using third-party hosted tools with predefined integrations for building them. Many services offer hundreds and some even offer thousands of predefined integrations. The hosting, support and authentication necessary is often handed off to these services that you end up choosing, and the idea is that because much of this common stuff is handled for you, you can get on with building the main focus of your application. And this comes at a bit of a cost, with no low or low code services being much more expensive to run than, say, a serverless alternative like Lambda, but without the upfront costs of a developer in many cases, which might be quite a bit more. As an example, let's consider something like a tool that collects daily sales data from Stripe. And then it goes off and summarizes it in a Google Sheet for somebody. It's possible for those who are tech savvy to be able to use a low code or no code service such as Zapier, or Zapier, however you want to say it, to be able to combine these two together without involving a developer. As a developer, why would I or you bother looking at this given you could write code yourselves or I could write code yourselves? That's kind of a good question, but one answerable with another. Why would we bother if we didn't have to? We should be aiming to minimize the amount of code that we're actually writing. So why worry about things like the authentication for each service, or if our server is up, or if the syntax for cron tab to be able to schedule things is correct? We really want to focus on the core of our apps and making those better, testing those things, rather than being bogged down with a lot of this boilerplate stuff. Granted, each service is a dependency, and a big one at that, but unless you're a big team, it's likely that an operations team at one of these platforms is going to be better at supporting the update of integrations than you are being able to remember to do it yourself. My own use case is being able to run smaller scripts and being able to find a nicer solution than being able to work with the complexity of lambdas in AWS each time that I wanted to be able to hack on something or perform an experiment. For my own first no-code workflow, which we'll be talking about in a sec, I wanted to be able to find a way of getting a regular summary of tweets that I'd liked on Twitter so that I could curate interesting links for my newsletter on a fortnightly basis. For this, I plan to regularly archive links to be over to a bookmark manager. In this case, it's raindrop.io. I took a look at a few different services, but I ultimately settled on Pipedream as my weapon of choice, and I've been using it ever since. I've written a blog post about why I chose it, which you can find in the video description below. But the too long didn't read version is that it allows me to modify any step using my own code, and has a very generous free plan on it. So for the rest of this video, we're going to jump over onto the Mac and show you some of the workflows that I'm running so you can get an idea of how Pipedream works. Okay, so the first one I'll take a look at is my Twitter workflow. So in here, you can see that we have a trigger kicking off everything, and that is that in this case, a Twitter liked tweet trigger. So we can get in and take a look at this, and we can actually edit the code and configuration there as well. So you can see the full code that's being run in JavaScript to be able to pull data from Twitter. Now, this is actually fine. This is what I need, so I don't need to edit that. My next step is just a plain and simple JavaScript function. It takes a look at what's been returned, and so here we've got the content of a particular tweet that came 12 hours ago, and I can see each of the fields on it. And this is kind of handy because in later steps I can then refer to that and use that for write my codes. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm saying, if there's anything in this particular event or the event that gets fired, if it has a URL, if it doesn't have a URL in it rather, or that it's a quoted tweet, then I don't want to do anything with it because typically those aren't interesting links. So I can run that now through a test event, and it will fire this entire workflow. So let's do that. So this pulls back some text, and it's just a funny tweet that one of my friends has recently done that I favorited. So I want to ignore it. And we can see that what's happened is the URL has not been found in a tweet, and so it hasn't bothered going any further. And if we click this link here, it shows me the log of workflows that I've run. So that's great, it's ended. If I then look at the next step, it is basically going off and scraping a recipe. Or scraping a recipe. It's going off and scraping. I've obviously edited some code to be able to do this. It's going off and scraping details of that page in order to be able to get a title so that we can save it back as data to Raindrop. Because normally it's truncated in some way. So it goes off, scrapes data, uses Cheerio to pull that title information out. And then the final step is an integration with Raindrop, which goes off and saves that using some tags that I predefined. So it takes the title, takes the link that we've found, and saves it back. So dead simple workflow, really useful. So this saves it back to a collection that's predefined, which is actually, if I come over to Raindrop and I'll show you, is this folder. So you can see my favorited links going in there. So we've got one from Indie Hackers, and we've also got a GitHub one, which isn't actually generated. You can see the tags are different. So I actually have another workflow here, save GitHub stars to Raindrop, which is doing a very similar thing, but is basically using an integration with GitHub to do the same thing. Now I won't go through that now, but yeah, that's really useful as well. So I basically end up with this folder with this week with details of all the links that I've favorited that week. Then I have another workflow, which is archiving the week's links. So let's take a look at that. Very simple. It has a trigger that runs on Sunday with a cron expression, and it creates a folder in Raindrop. So it creates a new dated folder within Raindrop. And the reason it does that, so that we can get this archive of the week's links. Based on the fact that we know that we already have a collection that has a particular ID that we're saving out to regularly, it then references the collection that we just created and says, copy everything in our this week folder into it. What's kind of nice about Raindrop is that if we make a reference to a particular parameter, then actually it will appear in this schema for parameters within there. And I'm not going to open that because it will expose the collection ID, but yeah, we can end up with a nice schema where we can just enter things within form fields. Yeah, so I really like Raindrop. I also really like Pipedream as a developer experience using these automation platforms. I think it's really good. The fact that it has these predefined integrations that already exist for the services that I use is one thing, but the fact that I can get in and mess around with the code is another. That's great. Hopefully that's given you a really good idea of how you can put together these sort of simple workflows. Perhaps you've got your own problems that you need to solve. Say you want to get notified of pull requests into Slack or Discord or whatever you're using. And you can see how Pipedream would be really beneficial to be able to put together these sort of workflows very quickly. I really like it myself. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments how you'd use something like Pipedream, and subscribe for more of this sort of stuff. Remember to check out the blog post that I've written on my website for comparing these services to developers, and I'll speak to you soon in the next video. Okay, bye.